Morning, everyone. This is Russell Rucker. I'm here for another constitutional talk. And, over the last couple of weeks, um, in some discussions, I came across somebody actually believed that the 27 complaints in the Declaration were just not true. So I thought we'd go through this a little bit today. Um, this is my copy of the Declaration of Independence. It's a copy to scale of the original. Um, just so you have kind of an idea of what I'm going to be reading from here. So we're going to read the Declaration of Independence in Congress, July 4th, 1776. The unanimous declaration of the 13 United States of America. When in the course of human events it becomes necessary for one people to dissolve the political bands which have connected them with one another, and to assume among the powers of the earth the separate and equal station to which the laws of nature and nature's God entitle them, a decent respect to the opinions of mankind requires that they should declare the causes which impel them to that separation. And that's where we're going to get to today, the causes. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain inalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, that to secure these rights, governments are instituted among men, deriving their just powers from the consent of the governed, that whenever any form of government becomes destructive of these ends, it is the right of the people to alter or abolish it, and to institute new government, laying its foundation on such principles and organizing its powers in such form as to them shall seem most likely to affect their safety and happiness. Prudence indeed will dictate the governments long established should not be changed for light and transient causes, and accordingly all reprehensive has shown that mankind are more disposed to suffer which evils are sufferable, than to right themselves by abolishing the forms to which they are accustomed. But when a long train of abuses and usurpations, pursuing invariably the same object, evinces a design to reduce them under absolute despotism, it is their right, is their duty to throw off such government and to provide new guards for their future security. Such has been the patient sufferance of these colonies, and such is now the necessity which constrains them to alter their former systems of government. The history of the King of Great Britain is a history of repented injuries and usurpations, all having in direct object the establishment of an absolute tyranny over these states. To prove this, let facts be submitted to an earnest world. He has refused his assent to laws, the most wholesome and necessary for the public good. Now, these laws that they're referring to are laws governing slavery, coining money, requesting representation at Parliament. The king promised the colonies that those responsible for the riots and that in Boston, if they paid for the damage, that they would be have some relief. But the king never went along and offered a blanket amnesty. He has referred the assent to laws the most wholesome and necessary for public good. This has more to do with the governors and just a neglect of the governors that he has appointed. He has forbidden his governors to pass laws of immediate and keeping importance unless suspended in their operation till his assent should be obtained. And when suspended, he has utterly neglected to attend to him. The king had arbitrary changes in legislative bodies without our consent. A good example of that is the dissolving of the House of Burgess in Virginia. He has refused in keeping important unless suspending in their operations till the assent should be obtained, and so suspended he has utterly neglected to attend to them. I just mentioned that. He has refused to keep other laws for the accommodation of large districts of people unless those people would relinquish their rights of representation in the legislature, a right esteemable to them and formidable to tyrants only. Now, what we're talking about is May 20, 1774, the Massachusetts Government Act, nullifying the Massachusetts Charter of 1691, allowing Thomas Gage, the governor, to dissolve provincial assemblies and force them to meet in Salem. He has called together legislative bodies at places unusual, uncomfortable, and distant from the depository of public records for the sole purpose of fatiguing them into compliance with his measures. Now, here again, what we're talking about is Massachusetts, North Carolina, the Virginia assemblies, and the House of Burgess. He has called together legislative bodies at places unusual, uncomfortable, and distant from the depository of the public records for the sole purpose of fatiguing them into compliance with his measures. He has dissolved representative houses repeatedly for opposing with manly firmness his invasions on the rights of people. This really has to do with the Restricting Act of 1767, where they did not even have a legislature for over a year because he suspended them. He has refused for a long time after such dissolution to cause others to be elected, whereby the legislative powers, incapable of annihilation, have returned to the people at large for the exercise, the state remaining, with meantime opposed to all the dangers of invasion from without and convulsions within. He has endeavored to prevent the population of these states for that purpose, obstructing the laws of naturalization of foreigners, refusing to others to encourage them migrations hither, and raising the conditions of the new appropriations of lands. Now, this has to do with the German immigrants, and they're trying to discourage them from coming. He has obstructed the administration of justice by refusing the assent of laws for establishing judicial powers. He deprived Massachusetts of the right to elect their own judges in 1774. The king appointed them and deemed an end to a trial by jury in so doing. He has elected multitude of new offices and sent hither firearms. He has made judges dependent on his will alone for the tenure of their office, and the amount and payment of their salaries. This has to do with the judges being appointed by the king, and then their salaries are paid for by the king, so they were loyal to the crown. He has erected a multitude of new offices, sent hither uh, swarms of officers to harass our people and eat out their substance. This has to do with the Stamp Act and the Intolerable Act, and allowing for the admiralty and vice admiralty was thereby established. He has kept in times of peace standing armies without consent of the legislature. Think of the Quartering Act there. He has affected to render the military independence of the superior to the civil power. The king and the parliament, through their governors and through their boards of trade. He has affected to render the military independent and superior to the civil powers. He has combined with others to subject us to jurisdiction foreign to our Constitution and unknowledged by our laws, giving the assent to the act of pretended legislation. And here he's talking about the administration of justice, which moved the persons from one colony to another. In quartering large bodies of armed troops among us. There again, we're talking about the Quartering Act. For protecting them by a mock trial for punishment for any murders which they shall commit on the inhabitants of these states. What we're talking about here is specific cases in which murderers weren't even punished. For cutting off our trade with all parts of the world. This has to do with the Navigation Acts and insisting on only British being allowed to deal with us. For imposing taxes without our consent. In other words, no representation without, no taxation without representation. For depriving us in many cases of benefits of trial by jury. For transporting us beyond our seas to be tried for pretended offenses. Once again, we're really talking here about the jurisdictional placement of where trials to occur. For abolishing the free system of English laws in a neighboring province, establishing therein an arbitrary government and it's enlarging its boundaries so as to render it once an example of fit instrument for introducing the same absolute rule into these colonies. Now, here we're talking about the Quebec Act, and we're talking about them to actually taking some of the territory that became the Midwest and insisting on a French common law instead of English common law. For taking our charters, abolishing our most valuable laws, and altering fundamentally the form of our government. This has to do with eliminating assemblies, elective bodies, and that sort of thing. He is at this time transporting large armies of foreign mercenaries to complete the works of death, desolation, and tyranny already begun with circumstances of cruelty and perfidy of the people. In other words, the German mercenaries. This is scarcely paralleled in the most barbarous ages and totally unworthy of the head of a civilized nation. He has constrained our fellow citizens taken captive to the high seas to bear arms against their country, to become the executioners of their friends and brethren, and to fall by their hands. that this has to do with the seizing of our ships, of taking people and forcing them to serve in their armies or go to jail. And then the whole idea is using our ships against us. He has excited domestic insurrections among us and has endeavored to bring on the inhabitants of our frontier the merciless Indian savages whose known rule of warfare is an undistinguished destruction of all ages, sexes, and conditions. So he stirred up the Indians to attack us and kill us. In every stage of oppression, we have petitioned for redress in the most humblest terms. Our repeated petitions have been answered by repeated injury. A prince whose character is thus marked by every act which may define a tyrant is unfit to be the rule of free people. Nor have we been wanting to in attention to our British brethren. We have warned them from time to time of attempts by their legislature to attend on a jurisdiction over us. We have reminded them of their circumstances of our emigration and settlement with here. We have appealed to their native justice and magnanimity. We have conjured them by the ties of our common kindred to disavow these usurpations, which would inevitably interrupt our connections and correspondence. They too have been deaf to the voices of justice and of consanguinity. We must therefore acquiesce in the necessities which denounces our separation and hold them as we hold the rest of mankind. Enemies in war, in peace, friends. We therefore, the representatives of the United States of America in General Congress assembled, appealing to the Supreme Judge of the world for restitute of our conditions, do in the name of the authority of the good people of these colonies solemnly publish and declare that these colonies are and ought right to be free and independent states, that they are absolved from their allegiances to the British Crown, and that all political conditions between them and the state of Great Britain is and ought to be totally dissolved, and that of free and independent states, they have the power to levy war, conclude peace, contract alliances, and establish commerce, and to do all other acts and things which independent states may have right do. And for the support of the Declaration, and for the support of this declaration, we affirm reliance on the protection of divine providence. We mutually pledge to each other our lives, our fortunes, and our sacred honor. And it's signed below. The Declaration of Independence really is an important document, and we celebrate every year our freedom and our liberty. And that's what's important in a republic like ours. This document was approved on July 2nd, and it was sent to the printer. And so on July 4th, it was brought back, and it was signed by all those present. While it was being signed, you could hear cannon fire in the background. You could hear thunder and lightning. It was not a pleasant situation. They were called one by one up to the head table by John Hancock, the president of the Second Continental Congress at this time. And it was a very solemn, quiet event because each one thought they were actually coming up and signing their own death warrant, because the king would certainly seek them out and look for them. And there was the possibility they would be executed for what they were now doing. One of our founders even joked as he went up to the head table about the size and weight of him being overweight. And one of the fellows at the head table was thin and kind of scrawny, and made the statement that he would probably bounce around on the gallows for a while and suffer, where he would die quickly. And that alleviated the tension in the room for a moment, but it quickly returned because it was such a solemn occasion. With that, I finished this reading. I hope that every year you enjoy the barbecues, the parades, the celebration, the reading of the Declaration, and everything else that you decide to do on your 4th of July, Independence Day, the birth of our nation. Thank you for your time. Have a good day. Goodbye for now. On Constitutional Talks, this is Russell Rucker.